Good morning. This is the innovation conversation. Tom, it's been a while. How you doing?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
You look impossibly cool in your shades outside. Where exactly are you?
I am in Nashville, Tennessee at the Kimpton Ayrton, I think it's called, for the FMI Supply Chain Forum.
Oh,
I'm hosting a panel here tomorrow, and always good to get out in the industry. Always love to be around, other operators, and of course, FMI does it right. So very happy to be here, and it's a
good,
beautiful day.
good. Um, so before we get into our main subject, I have to ask you, anybody who's read Morning Newsbeat or a number of other sources knows that your company, Replenium, last month filed a suit against Albertsons, uh, charging it with theft of intellectual property, specifically the Replenium system that you built. I'm gonna assume that it's something you can't really talk about it very much because you're in the middle of litigation. But I have to ask you because Morning Newsbeat readers and viewers will expect me to. Is there anything you can say about the suit at this point?
Well, I mean, yes, of course we did file. It was in the news. Super, super unfortunate, disappointing situation. I've worked across, I've done hundreds of deals with retailers and manufacturers over the years in my career, and in my mind, the boundaries have always been, have always been recognized, and it's just a really unfortunate situation that this happened. No, I can't really talk about it. Just that it's something Replenium had to do, in kind of defense of what's right, and in support of our shareholders, many of which are regular Morning Newsbeat watchers and listeners, and are lots of longtime leaders in the industry. So, again, very disappointing, inconsistent with things we've always experienced in the past, and we're hoping that we can reach a resolution. This thing doesn't have to drag on, but if it does, it does. We're prepared to do what needs to be done to get the right outcome here.
Last question. Replenium
Mhm.
still in business?
Oh yeah, Replenium is definitely in business.
Okay, good,
Absolutely.
good.
Yep.
Well, you know how I feel about auto replenishment and subscription programs, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. No, I love
So,
it.
so the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about today was a story that actually ran yesterday on Morning Newsbeat, which was concerns this letter that Andy Jassy wrote internally, and that it was internal for about 3 seconds, and then it was external, specifically laying out a couple of reorganization things at Amazon. The one that seemed to get the most attention was the notion is he wants everybody back in the office 5 days a week. I understand why some people are going to be upset by that, but it seems to me that if the boss wants you in the office 5 days a week and they're writing you a check uh, that those are the rules. I mean, they may lose. I would assume they may lose some good people, but they have a right to want that. And I do think there is an argument for in-person collaboration. It can be a real power for a company.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this is not the Amazon of 10 plus years ago, 20 years ago. Um, it's uh times are different now. I don't think you can force yourself back to that time, the famous Bezos quote, and I won't get it quite right, but if you're worried about work-life balance, you don't have the right work.
Right.
Something to that effect. And I just don't think you can force people into the work environment. Maybe it ultimately solves that you're going to get the right people that want to be there all the time there, but through the pandemic and the ways we changed working and the number of years that's occurred over, you have people in their late 20s, right, that have a whole bunch to offer, a whole bunch of energy to give, and this is a very significant change to the way that they were used to working. So I think it's a tough call. I mean, maybe they have some internal evidence that just proves that, hey, these projects where everybody's in for all this time, tend to work better. And I get it. You should want to be in the office more, because the work should be that engaging. You should be that into what you're doing and want that interaction, but forcing it, kind of full time all the time, without flexibility. Again, I think it should be a desired behavior, by an individual, not a forced mandate.
Yeah, I always love the example, and it may be somewhat apocryphal, but that when Pixar was building their headquarters, Steve Jobs, who was very involved in that process, and they had multiple bathrooms on every floor. He goes, "No, I want all the bathrooms downstairs near the cafeteria." Because the interaction that will happen as people are passing each other on the way to the bathrooms and the way to get a cup of coffee or lunch, that generates creativity. And that if people are just are not going beyond their cubbies or their divisions, you're not going to get that. I've always sort of agreed with that. And I'm somebody who's worked by himself for the vast majority of my career. But I also think that it ignores another what Amazon is doing ignores another reality, which inevitably there are people in Seattle who are collaborating with people in Arlington, right? Just because that's the way the world, and by the way, collaborating with people in London and people in India and people in Australia.
And people in Atlanta and people in the Bay Area.
Right?
Yeah, everywhere.
And so the fact is, not everybody's in the same place. Well, you can't do that with a company the size of Amazon. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But the larger part of it that I thought was interesting was when he wrote about the idea that he wanted to kind of reorganize the company and get rid of bureaucratic levels. His whole idea is he wanted to do things like eliminate pre-meetings for the decision meetings.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. And that was even going to create for a bureaucracy mailbox where people could email him and say, "Hey, this is an example of where bureaucracy is getting in the way to creativity." I have to say, I think this is kind of brilliant and could apply to companies that have one store or companies that have as broad an operation as Amazon does.
Yeah, it's funny when I saw that, special mailbox for this, I was like, oh man, that just sounds like big company stuff. Like you'd want to have the type of environment where you could just, not even have to do it anonymously. But I guess you'd love to have the environment where anybody could email the CEO and tell the CEO what they're seeing, right? Or email somebody that's far up in their chain of command to say, "Hey, I see this down in your org, and this should be fixed." I'd rather see it that way,
right?
But I think having this, this venue for that, will be good. I mean, it is, you just go back to the old days in Amazon when I was there, and the notion of the two pizza team, right? And that's 10 or less people, probably 7 or less people, really. Depends how hungry you are, how much pizza you can eat. But that's the right number of people to get around a problem and solve it. And I still think that really should hold true. But then when you're like, well, we're going to attack this thing and we want to approach this, and well, we got to bring it to so and so, but so and so's got to help us there first, and you end up with all these, this like intercompany roadmap, that your map that you have to follow to get something, on the table and approved. That's just going to crush innovation, long term. And I just, you'd have to think, just from the outside looking in, and this is brutal, but if Amazon had 35% less people, now, not in the fulfillment centers one, because I think they're probably very well, very appropriately, or maybe not even quite appropriately staffed. So I don't mean that down in the actual operations level, but headquarter level roles. Could they, if they had a third less people, would they be any less effective, or would they be more effective? And again, that's a big, I don't think Ant does any move like that, but you just wonder, as the bloat occurs over time and these incremental position adds each make sense in their own right. Do you just end up with an org, where you have this, a level 7 that reports to a level 7 that might report to another level 7, and does that really, foster agility? Not sure. Yeah. Probably not.
No, I would guess not. But the other thing is, it seems to me whether or not the bureaucracy mailbox is the appropriate vehicle or not, it seems to me that there's going to be one key to making that work, which is the ability after a very short period of time for him to say, I got this email and this is how we fixed it. If
Yeah.
he can show results, he'll get more emails that will be
Yeah.
actionable, right? But
Yeah.
if he gets 100 emails and he can't show any way in which the organization has been flattened, then people are going to think it's just lip service.
Totally. Here's what I would do if I was there, but I'm not. I would say, all right, our 6-pagers are now changing in format, right? And usually traditionally the 6-pagers, right? Roughly the first 2 pages are an assessment of your current business. The middle 2 pages are where you're taking it, in the next year to 2 years. And then the last 2 pages are how you're going to out innovate yourself, right?
Right.
Generally. Let's say the middle section, one of those 2 pages is going to be how I'm going to de-bureaucratize my organization. Right. So you got your current assessment of where you are, shows, probably in many organizations, Amazon's overall profits and, performance is great. So many of these orgs are going to be looking just fine. Right. But Andy's seeing we're not innovating at the pace we should. And I'm worried about our ability to innovate, especially with all these new capabilities coming, our ability to continue this pace. But we need to. Right. So first 2 pages, assessment of your current business, middle 2 pages, where we're taking it over the next year or two, including how we're going to de-bureaucratize our group. Now, that doesn't mean, how we're going to whack a bunch of heads necessarily, although it could end up to be there, but how we're going to ensure that, the investment in our organization and the things we're doing, are going to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 pages are, and then based on that efficiency and based on that organizational readiness, where then can we take this in the future? That's what I would do.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Ingrain it.
Yeah. Martin Peers at The Information had an interesting piece that he did kind of analyzing what Jassy was doing. And I thought he made 2 really interesting points, one of which I agree with and one of which I can't, you can assess better than I. He said that, he writes, it sounds like an acknowledgement that Amazon is in the dreaded day 2 phase that founder Jeff Bezos described in 2016 as stasis, which always ends in death. And I think we both agree with that we have been saying here for a long time that Amazon clearly has reached the day 2 stage. And so he's trying to get back to that, to act more like a startup. The other interesting thing is that the Peers at least sees this as being Jassy's attempt or desire to blame some of this on Bezos. He basically said, because that Bezos in his latter years as CEO may have allowed the bloat to go beyond where it should have.
Well, I saw that in the article. I think that's an interesting take on it. Knowing, I don't know Jassy well, but I know him. Doesn't seem like the tact he would take. I do think there was a period of time in the company while Jeff was still at the helm where they were experiencing this, crazy acceleration of growth. And just the compounding factor, you apply the same growth rate to a larger base, the number of employees that come in through that are just insane, right? And that can get away from you pretty quickly. So yeah, that probably some of that was under Jeff's watch. I would imagine while they were doing it, they were feeling pretty good about the decisions they were making. But then the accumulation of those decisions, you kind of end up with gosh, what do we become? You might not build out your management processes, such to be able to scale through that. I think the leadership principles are great. I think they're really great. They should be very well time tested, but they can also, in a big organization, you can kind of, in a large bureaucratic organization, you can kind of, use the leadership principles to kind of justify anything you're doing, right? You kind of, kind of fit what you're doing into that, and that's super dangerous. But I think there's no doubt. You hate to admit it, you got to bring it back, the day 1 mentality. But clearly, with the size of the company, this type of discussion, the acknowledgement of their bloat, they're definitely in day 2. Hopefully the sun hasn't come up yet, and they can, and somehow they can, kind of extend the, you know, the day one, kind of culture. But, part of it is you are a big company, you're a 30-year-old company, for gosh sakes. It's going to be hard to be, you know, have the same kind of day one ethos and culture that you had 20, 30 years, 20,
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago.
Well, at a certain point,
So
yeah, at a certain point that sounds disingenuous. It's
it
like
does,
not connected to
exactly.
reality.
Right. So just make your day two, better,
Yeah.
and make your day two, set because by the way, throughout history, the largest empires have crumbled, the largest companies have crumbled, right? It always happens, like 100% of the time.
Right.
It always happens. And Jeff has come out and said, someday we'll be out of business, which is nuts. But you got to go figure out how to become the company that doesn't succumb to that, and take that on as your challenge. Right. It's not only about going and finding that magic from yesteryear, which I think that culturally, if you can bring a bunch of that forward, it's great. But you got to go figure out now how to be this big company that remains agile, that remains on the cutting edge, innovating across a whole bunch of dimensions that enables you to have that long-term staying power.
It's interesting. I'm not sure it's exactly the bloat and lack of agility or even a day two mentality are the problems. But it seems to me, they Amazon also last week announced this whole new approach to pricing, right? And they were going to talk about reducing prices on a lot of different items, and also they came up with this new private label brand, Amazon Saver, in grocery. And and I've having written about it when it came out, and also since then done a lot of checking. And I mean, it just seems to me that this strikes me as almost an innovation by committee, which is not really innovative. I mean, I checked right before you and I checked last week when I wrote it, and I checked right before you and I got on to see, and even now, when you type in Amazon Saver in the search box, you have to get through a lot of stuff before you find an Amazon Saver product, and then you have to go down even more to find another one. Ironically, you have to get through a bunch of sponsored products before you get to the Amazon Saver
Yeah, they pay the bills.
right? And so, again, I mean, it's like they do this stuff, but they're not creating an ecosystem in the way they have in other areas. It just seems so tactical, like, oh, we have a problem with pricing. Well, let's do this. Or we need another private label. I don't know that they need another private label item. They just need to communicate better about what they've got. And there's not even with this new one, they're not communicating. So to me, again, I don't know if it's bloat or lack of agility or what the hell it is, but they do these things on grocery, but it's like, man, they are not killing it. They're not being Amazon when it comes to grocery. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that they're, again, what it ultimately comes down to, what is their as unassailable as possible value proposition to the customer in grocery, right? And I don't, that to me is not clear. Like, what are you, and that needs to be far better crystallized and articulated than it is today. And then I think if we know what that is, then some of these kind of tactical moves, may make sense within that. But I just don't see what it is they're trying to be for their grocery customer. And that's, and I'm a potential customer. I used to run a business, but I'm also a potential customer. I don't see it. And, I don't know how many people out there do see it. Maybe you see it a little bit more if you have a new, Amazon Fresh store come up in your neighborhood, and you go there and you kind of figure out how it serves you, relative to the other competitors in the market. But I don't see that. So yeah, I mean, I think, tactically, if you want to be a good value price, solution for your customers, I think these pricing moves make sense. If we're in this kind of inflationary, although you could argue now we're becoming post-inflationary, but even post-inflationary, you're still in a higher price environment than you were when you went in. So, in this environment, does this product set, solve a customer need better than either other solutions out there, or does it solve it well within the portfolio of what Amazon's grocery offering is? What's the, yeah, I mean, I don't know. again, they don't seem like terrible moves in their own right. Um, and maybe they redirect their, but also, I guess to your point, if you can't find the products, they're probably not executing as well as they could.
Yeah.
And this kind of splintered, initiative, just it's not making sense in the broader context. And and again, I don't know that that's a direct function of bloat, but when a key merchandising strategy that is such a key need for your customer base and such a high percentage of the dollars that they spend at retail, when you don't have that clearly articulated, particularly versus the rest of Amazon is very well articulated, right? You go there, they have it, it's inexpensive, it gets to you fast, like super simple. Now they're doing their best to challenge that experience with sponsored ads and everything all over the place, right? But at the end of the day, the value proposition of that part of the business is pretty straightforward. So it seems like the grocery proposition should be that straightforward and complementary to the broader position. And that to me just seems to be something that they've missed.
Yeah. We're doing an epic version here because we haven't talked to so long. But one more subject I want to talk to you about briefly, not about Amazon, and that is I thought it was a really interesting story about how Tesco is going to start creating an offshoot of its business called Transcend, in which basically they're going to be trying to sell technology software solutions that they've used in their business to other businesses. And the way it's been positioned is that they're competing with Ocado.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the easy comparison because Ocado also comes out of the UK. Again, smart idea. Is this kind of competition called for? And I don't know. It just seems like, again, we're getting these big companies that are dominating this stuff. And I just wonder if the vast majority of companies in retail that are not at that scale are going to be well served by these kinds of deals.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm at the helm of one of those companies and I'm innovating, I'm investing in innovation. If there's further ways to monetize that, that makes sense. If you're one of those big companies. I mean, I lived at Amazon when we took our compute power and it became AWS, right? And then you see Amazon doing it with the retail capabilities today. You see Walmart doing that with their capabilities as well. Of course, Ocado has been doing that for years, and now Tesco's in the game too. So, I get the strategy from their standpoint. Interesting as you get more and more of these big companies competing with each other too, does that ultimately become distractive to them and create an opportunity for the smaller guys? Maybe. But totally get why they do it. But I do think it's dangerous for the mid-tier and smaller players that they may have some of the best technology to offer, and it may the technology from Tesco may be better in many cases than the technology from an independent small startup. And so you do that enough though, and you're running you as a retailer are running somebody else's technology in enough areas, and if you compete against that, you just have fewer spots to pick for differentiation. So I think it's dangerous. I think that I think the industry could use could definitely use a new kind of innovation model, a new investment model. And I do think that you're going to hear a little bit more about that upcoming. There's definitely something in the works that could potentially create a really interesting opportunity for the industry to have a hand in how it invests in innovation, and how it rolls that innovation out, and ultimately can benefit retailers large, medium, and small alike.
I love to end with a tease. So
cliffhanger.
Hey, listen, great to see you. Good luck at the conference, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to see you in person because we're going to be at grocery shop, and we're doing a party, so it's all going to be great fun.
Woo-hoo. Look forward to it. Look forward to seeing everyone there.
Travel safe.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.